Hogan was not a perfect human being. Terry Bollea, the person, is vastly different from Hulk Hogan, the character. We still at least have to have some sort of respect for Hulk Hogan for his contributions to the wrestling industry. I feel like TNA fumbled big time by not having Mike Santana get the win. TNA is WWE's younger brother. TNA does what the older brother tells him to do. LOL TNA, that's the running joke. It follows them everywhere. LOL TNA follows them everywhere. TNA, at the end of the day, is a distant number 3. I believe Goldberg going to AEW would tarnish his legacy.
Get stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Kurt Angle, yeah. Why Triple H? You son of a I. Tell me why. And Tony Khan, this is also on you.
I am going to ruin wrestling.
Just get over it.
Tragedy. Tragedy is the only word that I can describe this past week. Tragedy. Not just in the wrestling space, but all over pop culture, and really just this whole week was just full of tragedy. Of course, this week started with Malcolm Jamal Warner. Of course, Cosby Show fame, passed away at 54. Then later in the week, we find out that Ozzy Osbourne passed away, and he had a long battle with Parkinson's disease. And what's crazy about Ozzy's passing was he passed away 2 weeks after his final performance. He passed away 2 weeks after his farewell performance. And it was a very emotional performance. But we found out that Ozzy had passed away. A legend in the rock and roll space. A legend in heavy metal. And then after Ozzy's passing, we found out about Hulk Hogan. Ironically, what's crazy about this is I didn't find out about Hulk Hogan's passing on social media. It was Thursday morning. Well, to be fair, I overslept. And I woke up at 12 p.m. I woke up in the afternoon. My sleep schedule is all messed up. And as soon as I wake up, the first call I get was from my dad. The first call that I got was from my dad. And he told me Hulk Hogan had passed away. He told me that Hulk Hogan had passed away. He called me and he said, "Ricky, did you hear? Hulk Hogan has passed away." And normally, you know, when you wake up from, you know, when you're asleep and you just had a long sleep, you know, you wake up and you're all tired. I was tired when I woke up and I picked up the phone. But as soon as he said Hulk Hogan had passed away, I immediately woke up. And the first thing that I told my dad was, "What? Hulk Hogan had passed away?" And while I'm on the phone with my dad, I go on my X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And I scroll through my X, and throughout my entire X feed, it's just everybody tweeting about Hulk Hogan. Everybody paying tribute to the legend that is the immortal Hulk Hogan. And it struck me. Later on that day, I remember I was driving through Newark, New Jersey. It's not the perfect town in the world, but I was driving through Newark, New Jersey, and I was blasting Real American. I was blasting Real American in my car while I was driving. Numerous times. I played it on loop. And I almost shed a tear. I'm being serious. I almost shed a tear. People need to understand that this is a major loss in the entire wrestling stratosphere. This is a major loss in the entire wrestling world. Hulk Hogan was somebody who transcended wrestling into what you see today. He transcended wrestling into the mainstream. Now, I wasn't alive in the 80s. I wasn't alive in the 90s. I was born in 2002. And crazy enough, Hulk Hogan was still wrestling in 2002. If anything, I actually believe that his 2002 to 2003 run was actually fantastic. One of his best runs ever, in my opinion, especially that year in 2002 when he came back to the company after 9 years. But when it comes to Hulk Hogan, I feel, yes, the guy, Terry Bollea, the person, was a complicated individual. It's no secret. And it's no secret with the things that he said 10 years ago. And ironically, the audio that leaked back in 2015 happened 10 years ago to the day that Hulk Hogan had passed away. And I remember when I found out about it, I was, I believe, in middle school, heading into high school, I believe. I'm 23 years old. I may have still been in middle school. I was shocked, disappointed, and angry. I was upset because this was the guy that preached, say your prayers, take your vitamins, all that stuff. Hulk Hogan, the character, and Terry Bollea, the person, were two vastly different individuals. Two vastly different individuals. And if you heard the audio piece of what Hulk Hogan said, it's baffling and it's horrible. A lot of the stuff that he said was absolutely horrible. And his apology was way worse. His apology was way worse. There's no doubt about it. His apology was way worse because he goes to the locker room and instead of offering an apology from, in Hulk's perspective, what was an apology, instead was kind of a, how do I say it? A warning of, hey, you never know. You may get caught in certain scenarios and be careful what you're going to say. So if you're somebody in the WWE locker room and you're trying to give an apology and you say that, it doesn't really sound like an apology. Terry Bollea, the person, was not a perfect human being. I'm going to say that right here and right now. Terry Bollea, the person, was not a perfect human being. None of us are perfect human beings. I'm not going to sit here and defend what Hulk Hogan said in that audio that leaked 10 years ago. I'm not going to defend him on that. Yes, we all make mistakes, but a lot of what Hulk Hogan said was unforgivable. Unforgivable. Also, me being a minority myself, I'm Hispanic. You know, if he said something about one group of people, what do you think he would say about another group of people? You know what I'm saying? But I thought it was foolish amongst a lot of people. Yes, he said these horrible, horrible, horrible things. And yes, you have the right to express your opinion on what he said. All power to you. But the idea of celebrating his death, to me, I had a problem with. I had a problem with people celebrating Hulk Hogan's death. Why? Because a lot of these people that are celebrating his death, I feel like don't actually care. I'm being serious. And don't take me out of context here. I'm not defending anything that Hulk Hogan said. If anything, what Hulk Hogan said was horrible. But the idea of you celebrating the fact that he passed away is foolish. It's arrogant. And it's horrible. And from a moral standpoint, I feel like a lot of people threw their moral standards out of the window, in my opinion. That's just me. If you disagree with me, that's fine. You have the right to disagree with me. I was very angry at many people just celebrating his death. I was very upset. Because at the same time, this guy gave it his all, and he made wrestling what it is today. Terry Bollea, the person, and Hulk Hogan, the man, are two completely different individuals. They are. Terry Bollea, the person, was, if you really think about it, kind of selfish. He was. I'll be the first one to say it. Hell, I said my fair share of Hulk Hogan many times, and it's on video. I have. Do I regret a lot of the things that I say? No, I don't. I've made many videos about Hulk Hogan. I don't want to say I made many videos about Hulk Hogan, but in videos I've stated my fair share of what I thought about Hulk Hogan. I was at WrestleMania 37. I was only in the first night of WrestleMania 37 because that was the first WrestleMania that was 2 nights, but I was live in Tampa at WrestleMania 37 where Hulk Hogan came out and everybody booed him out of the arena or booed him out of the stadium. I was one of those people that booed him out of the stadium. I'll be the first one to admit it. He showed up at the first Raw on Netflix in Los Angeles at the Intuit Dome. He got booed out of the arena. Rightfully so. And some people stated that he got booed because of his political beliefs and his affiliation with Trump. I actually disagree. He didn't get booed because of his political beliefs or because he supported Trump. Because Undertaker, who endorsed Trump, I believe, was on that same show, got cheered from the entire crowd. He got cheered from the entire crowd. And Hulk Hogan was booed out of the arena for one reason and one reason only. And it's what I just talked about. I think what Hulk Hogan's legacy will be is a complicated one. He was one of the most beloved acts in wrestling, in all of wrestling. I mean, for God's sakes, the guy was huge in the 80s. The guy was huge in the 80s. People need to understand that. Hulk Hogan was not just a superstar. You know, WWE always calls their wrestlers superstars. He was not a superstar. He was a megastar. He was a megastar. There's many stories of him being selfish behind the scenes. Jesse Ventura has gone on record and talked about how Hulk Hogan single-handedly prevented the unionization of wrestling, which you can crucify Hulk Hogan for that, but at the same time, if you're in Hulk Hogan's position, of course it's going to jeopardize your spot. Anybody in Hulk Hogan's position, I mean, let's be honest, even though unionization would be great for the industry, if you're in Hulk Hogan's shoes, would you honestly want to unionize wrestling? I'm just giving you an example of putting you in the shoes of Hulk Hogan. You are making millions of dollars and you are the top guy in the World Wrestling Federation. Would you jeopardize that? No, you wouldn't. That's just the truth. Hulk Hogan's loss is major. It's sparked a lot of mixed emotions by a lot of people, and rightfully so. And the people that stated their mixed emotions have the right to state their mixed emotions. I just think there's a big difference between people celebrating his death and the people that actually express their own personal beliefs on Hulk Hogan. There's a big difference with that. The people that are expressing their emotions and talking about the negative of Hulk Hogan have the right to talk about the negative of Hulk Hogan. And they are not wrong. But I feel like the people that are celebrating his death for the sake of celebrating his death, to me, I feel like are just doing that for clout and don't actually give a crap. That's just me, though. There's a big difference in talking about somebody and the mistakes that they've made. And trust me, I've went on record and I just talked about all of the mistakes that he made, and I do not stand with all the decisions that Terry Bollea as a person made. There's a difference between talking about it and celebrating a man's death. Because keep in mind, a daughter lost their father. A wife lost her husband. And a son lost his father. At the end of the day, when it comes to all of the stories that we hear about Hulk Hogan, about how he was being selfish, all of this and that and this and that, we have the right to believe it, and most of the time we do believe it. I believe many of the stories, but most of us, aside from many of the wrestlers that had the opportunity to work with Hulk Hogan, that had the opportunity to work with Terry Bollea, actually know the man who Hulk Hogan or Terry Bollea was. Me, myself, I've never met Hulk Hogan. I've never talked to Hulk Hogan, so I do not know how he is as a person. From the stories that I've read and the audio footage that I hear, it sounds very negative. But from a lot of the wrestlers that got a chance to work with Hulk Hogan have stated very positive things about Hulk Hogan. Yes, Hulk Hogan in his prime was selfish. But at the end of the day, the people that know the real Terry Bollea are the people that got a chance to work with him, his friends, and his family. That's it. That's it. That is it. Hulk Hogan passed away this past Thursday. It was reported by TMZ News, or TMZ Sports, sorry. Hulk Hogan, the wrestling legend, has died at 71 years old, TMZ Sports has learned. Medics were dispatched to the WWE Icon's Clearwater, Florida home early Thursday morning, with operators stating it was regarding a quote-unquote cardiac arrest. A video of the scene outside of Hogan's residence shows responders desperately trying to save his life as he was transported to an ambulance. In this clip, several paramedics appear to be conducting chest compressions as Hogan is wheeled to the emergency vehicle. Cops tells officials responded to the call at 9:51 a.m. and Hogan was treated by Clearwater Fire and rescue personnel before taken to a nearby hospital. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. During a news conference Thursday afternoon, Clearwater Police Nate Burnside stated that Hulk died at 11:17 a.m. before adding that there are no quote-unquote signs of foul play or suspicious activity. Just a few weeks ago, Hogan's wife Sky, whom he married in September of 2023, denied rumors that he was in a coma, stating that he was quote-unquote strong as he recovered from surgeries. TMZ Sports broke the story last month. There are rumblings of Hogan was on his quote-unquote deathbed. Now, I'm going to talk about this right here and right now. There were stories that came out about Hulk Hogan being on his quote-unquote deathbed. And a lot of those stories were reported not just by TMZ Sports, but a lot of people, for example, Bubba the Love Sponge, were talking about this. Now, I have a very strong opinion on Bubba the Love Sponge. In my opinion, I genuinely believe that Bubba the Love Sponge is a horrible human being. In my opinion, I genuinely believe that Bubba the Love Sponge is a piece of crap human being, a horrible human being. And people talk about how bad Hulk Hogan was when it comes to what he stated in that leaked audio that came out 10 years ago. Bubba the Love Sponge is 10 times worse. Bubba the Love Sponge is 10 times worse. I don't like the guy. But Bubba was... He throughout the past couple of weeks, he was stating that Hulk Hogan was on his deathbed. And I'm going to be honest. We all kind of shrugged it under the rug. It wasn't as big of a story as it should have been. If you remember almost 10 years ago, or I believe it was like 8 years ago, back in like 2017, Ric Flair was also on his deathbed. Ric Flair, people need to understand, was also on his deathbed, and that was major news across every different media outlet. This wasn't. This was not. This was not. It was reported upon, but not a lot of people were talking about it. That's what I'm trying to get out here. Not a lot of people were talking about it. But there were rumblings that Hogan was on his deathbed, but TMZ Sports was told that at the time he was dealing with the symptoms of a neck procedure he underwent in May. Hulk-born Terry Bollea transformed professional wrestling into a family entertainment sport. Before Hulk, Wrestling catered to a fairly narrow audience, a small audience per se. This was during the territory days. Hulk's theatrics in the ring were magnetic for children and their parents, and it supercharged the sport. We're going to be talking about Hogan's life and his influence in the entire wrestling space. Hulk Hogan, of course, Hulk Hogan was born on August 11th, 1953 in Augusta, Georgia. He was the youngest son of Pete Balea, a construction foreman, and Ruth Balea, a homemaker and dance instructor. Pete and Ruth died in 2001 and 2011, respectively. Balea, then known by his birth name, struggled with his body image growing up. In a 2019 interview, he stated this, and I quote, he was bullied for having, quote-unquote, the largest head in elementary school, and that he was so overweight he refused to take his shirt off at the beach. Moving on to his wrestling career, back in, I believe, 1979, that same year, Balea's talent caught the attention of Vince McMahon Sr., not Vince Jr., Vince Sr., Vince McMahon's father, the legendary promoter and owner of the WWF, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, before it was the World Wrestling Federation, the most prominent wrestling league in the Northeast. McMahon gave Balea an opportunity to join the promotion and create a new identity. Because of his massive physique, he stood 6 feet 8 inches and weighed 303 pounds. His uncanny resemblance to the comic book hero, McMahon suggested that Terry assume the stage of the name Hulk Hogan. Now, people need to understand, Hulk Hogan actually made his debut, I believe it was 1979. He initially was a heel. Yes, he turned heel in 1996 and he formed the New World Order, but he started his wrestling career in the WWF as a heel. And ironically, his first run in the WWF ended, I don't want to say in disaster, but of course, Hulk Hogan was a part of Rocky III. And when Hulk Hogan was a part of Rocky III, Vince Sr. did not want Hulk Hogan to be a part of that movie. And what happened was, even though he tried to negotiate with McMahon Sr., at the end of the day, Vince Sr. fired him. And what happened? Rocky III ended up being a smash hit. And according to my research here, Rocky III actually ended up being the second highest grossing film of 1982. So what did Hulk Hogan do? Now, keep in mind, this was 1982. So the WWF, when Vince Sr. was running it, was not the only game in town. Yes, when Vince Jr. bought it, there were still other wrestling promotions out there, but when Vince Jr. bought the promotion from his father, of course, he was planning on global domination. He was planning on a national expansion because at the time, when Vince Sr. was running the WWF, it was only in the New York territory because this was during the era of the territories. And a lot of those territories were under the sanctioning body of the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance. And what's crazy is that the NWA still exists, but it's not a sanctioning body. It's a wrestling promotion. Billy Corgan owns it, but that's another story for another time. So what did Hulk Hogan do when it came to his wrestling career? Hulk Hogan wrestled in the AWA. He wrestled for Verne Gagne in 1981. He also wrestled in Japan, and ironically, he became a big star in Japan. If you want to know where he got the Hulkamania personality, and he really found the groundwork for what Hulkamania will eventually be throughout the entirety of the decade of the 1980s, it was his work in the AWA and in Japan. I mean, Hulk Hogan, people need to understand, was big in Japan. Huge in Japan. I mean, there's footage of Hulk Hogan wrestling a style that you wouldn't realize Hulk Hogan would do. Like, he wrestled a style that was very different than the style that he would wrestle in the United States. His wrestling was vastly different in Japan than it was over here in the States. Because, again, in Japan, and to this day in Japan, wrestling is considered a legitimate sport. Yes, it's predetermined, but in Japan, wrestling is considered a sport, like a legitimate sport. But Hulk Hogan found the groundwork for what would be Hulkamania in the AWA and, of course, in Japan. And he comes in, he returns back to the WWF because, of course, at this point, Vince McMahon Jr. purchased the business from his father, and Vince McMahon Jr. had different plans for what he wanted the WWF, or later, as he would rename the WWF, the World Wrestling Federation, to be. He wanted global expansion. He wanted global domination. And unfortunately, if you wanted global domination, that would mean that you were going to have to compete with your father's business friends. That means you were going to have to compete with other territories. So again, we had stories of Vince McMahon going into these other different territories. A lot of these promoters were vastly pissed off at Vince Jr. Vastly pissed off at Vince Jr. And we're going to Vince McMahon's father saying, "What is your kid doing? What is your kid doing? We have a pact. You're not supposed to compete with us." But Vince Jr. had different motives. He didn't care. Vince McMahon, in many documentaries and in many interviews, stated, "Look, I didn't put these guys out of business. They put themselves out of business." He thought the idea of the old school, traditional NWA, everybody's working together style of wrestling was bullcrap. And he wanted to expand. And he wanted to make the WWF the top league of the entire wrestling industry. And if you're Vince McMahon, let's be honest, it was a smart move. You can crap on Vince McMahon all you want, but it was a smart move on his end. If it wasn't for Vince McMahon, and look, I've said my fair share of Vince McMahon. He's not a perfect human being here. He ain't no saint. He ain't no saint either. But Vince McMahon was smart in trying to expand the WWF into what it is today, especially in the 1980s. He brought, with the help of Hulk Hogan, he brought the WWF to a new level. That is what happened. He brought the WWF to a new level. So what happened? He brought in Hulk Hogan. And I believe it was 1984 where he beat the Iron Sheik for the WWF Championship. And this was huge. This was huge considering, of course, Hulk Hogan was big. And that match against the Iron Sheik was essentially what skyrocketed Hulkamania into what we knew in the 1980s. So I'm reading this from his biography. In 1984, Hogan was awarded the WWF Championship for his memorable defeat of the Iron Sheik. He quickly rose to superstardom and, resulting in fan frenzy nicknamed Hulkamania, became legendary. Hogan's success during the time bolstered the public's fascination with professional wrestling. In total, he became a 12-time world champion, 6 times the WWE champion, and another 6 times as the WCW champion. In 1987, Hogan defended his World Heavyweight Championship title at WrestleMania 3 in front of 93,000 people. Now, Dave Meltzer tends to argue that the number of 93,000 people is a little overboard. But since WWE constantly says it's 93,000 people, it's 93,000 people. I don't care what anybody says. There's 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome, or as Hulk Hogan would say, the Superdome or the Silverdome. Remember that back in WrestleMania 30? But he, of course, wrestled Andre the Giant. He famously picked him up. He, of course, according to this, famously picking up the 500-pound behemoth. But in front of 93,000 people, he picked up Andre the Giant and slammed him. And, of course, that was dubbed the Slam heard around the world. The success of Hogan, enjoyed in the 1980s, waned in the early 1990s. Accused of prohibiting anabolic steroids to his wrestlers. So we're now entering the stage of the early 1990s where, of course, George Zahorian was indicted and actually, I believe, was sent to prison for distributing steroids to its wrestlers. And, of course, Hogan was called to testify against his former boss, Mr. McMahon, or Vince McMahon. Hogan's admission of drug abuse forced him to terminate both his wrestling and film careers. And ironically, when it came to that whole scenario, Hulk Hogan, before, I believe, the indictment of Vince McMahon, went on the Arsenio Hall show. He went on the Arsenio Hall show, and he flat out denied and lied. He lied that he took any types of steroids whatsoever. You had guys like superstar Billy Graham. Guys like superstar Billy Graham call Hulk Hogan out on his BS. Superstar Billy Graham called him out on his BS, which is crazy. So he essentially lied in public. So then after that, of course, the 90s came along, and then he essentially joins World Championship Wrestling, WCW. Now, WCW was bought Originally, it was Jim Crockett Promotions, but WCW was bought in 1988 by, of course, Ted Turner. And WCW in the early 90s was really a money loser. You know, it was a money loser, and a lot of the executives at Time Warner just hated the fact that WCW was a thing. And even during WCW's peak, a lot of people hated the fact that, of course, WCW was around. They should have just, you know, they had the idea of, man, we should just shut this down. It is a money loser for us. But that wasn't until Eric Bischoff came in. Once Eric Bischoff came along, he tried to change the trajectory of World Championship Wrestling. And one of those things was him bringing in Hulk Hogan. That was one of his ideas. I should bring in Hulk Hogan. Now, keep in mind, Hulk Hogan left the WWF in 1993. He left the WWF in 1993, and he wanted to pursue a career in Hollywood. Now, granted, Hulk Hogan's career in Hollywood didn't really last long. I believe he was filming a show called Thunder in Paradise. And that was where he was approached by Eric Bischoff, and the rest is history. Of course, he had a run in WCW from 1994 all the way to 2000. And he was a babyface from 1994 to 1996 because, of course, 1996 came along, and that was the heel turn heard all around the world, that being Bash at the Beach 1996. Bash at the Beach 1996, where, of course, Hulk Hogan comes out in the red and yellow. This was when already Scott Hall, Kevin Nash showed up on Nitro, and then, of course, they were doing the six-man tag, and they were teasing a third man at Bash at the Beach. Who was going to be that third man? Originally, that third man was going to be Sting. But if you really think about it, in Hulk Hogan's eyes, and he stated this in many interviews and documentaries, it doesn't really make sense for the guy to be Sting, to be the third man, because he was not a WWE guy. He was not a WWF guy. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are essentially invaders of the WWF in WCW. They were invaders. Who is the perfect guy to turn heel and join Scott Hall and Kevin Nash? The perfect guy to join Scott Hall and Kevin Nash was Hulk Hogan. So what happens? Hulk Hogan comes out in the red and yellow. Meanwhile, you have Tony Schiavone, Dusty Rhodes, and Bobby Heenan on commentary. Bobby Heenan on commentary was like, whose side is he on? Whose side is he on? Why would you spoil that? God rest Bobby Heenan's soul, man. I love Bobby Heenan. Bobby Heenan is one of the greats. And then Dusty Rhodes was like, what are you talking about? And then, of course, what happens? Hulk Hogan does his typical Hulk Hogan shtick. He rips his shirt off, and then he does the unthinkable. And hits the leg drop heard around the world. I believe it was on Macho Man. And what happens? Hogan forms the New World Order. Hogan forms the NWO. Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan, the rest is history. And that was what single-handedly led to WCW to destroy the WWF. Destroy the WWF for 83 consecutive weeks. And then, of course, you guys know the rest of history. The NWO essentially imploded on itself. Even though it rose to the heights of WCW, it essentially, at the same time, if you kind of think about it, killed WCW. And after that, of course, WCW gets bought out by the WWF. Well, first off, he also put over Goldberg, which we will be talking about in this video. And in the Georgia Dome in front of, I believe it was like 40,000 people in 1998. One of the greatest moments in Nitro history. WCW closes. His Hulk Hogan's tenure in WCW ended very badly. And what happens is he returns to the company in 2002. And he comes in as a heel, as the NWO, with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. I've always said this, his run in 2002 to 2003 was probably one of his best runs. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but his SmackDown run was awesome. I mean, for God's sakes, this guy put over Brock Lesnar. He put over Brock Lesnar like $1 million. Steve Austin wasn't willing to put over Brock Lesnar because, of course, it didn't make sense. I mean, there needs to be a little bit more build-up. But Hulk Hogan gladly put over Brock Lesnar. People don't really talk about that. But what happens? What happens? He has the match with The Rock, arguably one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time. And what's crazy is that Hulk Hogan has had phenomenal matches at WrestleMania and phenomenal storylines. Of course, the Ultimate Challenge at WrestleMania 6 against Ultimate Warrior. Of course, his match against Macho Man. The Mega Powers imploding. One of the greatest storylines in not only WWE history, but, and if you really think about it, the entirety of wrestling history. His match against The Rock was arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, WrestleMania match of all time. And that's on par with Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25. I'm being serious. One of the greatest matches in history. One of the greatest matches in history. And a large portion of that had to do with the crowd. Hogan came as a heel. Rock came in as a babyface. But the crowd favored Hulk Hogan, even though he was the bad guy. The crowd favored Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan came in as Hollywood Hulk Hogan in Toronto at the Skydome, but Hulk Hogan left the Skydome with Hulkamania running wild. That was the significance about that match. And then, of course, he had the match with Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 19, which was, again, another match that doesn't really get talked about, but it was a phenomenal match. I loved the hype package for Vince McMahon versus Hulk Hogan. They dubbed it 20 years in the making. I remember watching that match constantly when I was a kid. I actually have WrestleMania 19 on DVD. I still have the DVD. It's right over there. And the cover is Hulk Hogan facing off against the evil Mr. McMahon. Ironically, my first introduction to Hulk Hogan was not even in any wrestling capacity. It was in a movie. It was in a movie. And that movie was called Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain. And Hulk Hogan played this character called Dave Dragon. That was my first introduction to Hulk Hogan. But in wrestling capacity, my first introduction to Hulk Hogan was this DVD right here. This DVD right here is called The Greatest Superstars of WrestleMania. Now, I know DVDs are obsolete. Everybody streams now, including myself, but I keep my DVD collection to myself because it's wrestling memorabilia, and I have a lot of wrestling memorabilia around my studio. This is arguably considered one of the worst. If you're talking to any wrestling DVD collector, this is arguably one of the worst wrestling DVDs out there because it doesn't have a lot of the great matches that you would think would be in this DVD. Like, for example, you don't have Hogan versus Andre at WrestleMania 3. You don't have the Ultimate Challenge with Hulk Hogan versus Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6. You don't have Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage. Hell, you don't even have the first ever WrestleMania main event, which was a friggin' tag team match with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T taking on Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. But my first Hulk Hogan match was, ironically, which is crazy to think, was WrestleMania 7, Hulk Hogan versus Sergeant Slaughter. But the bright spot about this DVD was also it had Rock versus Hogan at WrestleMania 18. So yeah. And then, of course, later on, Hogan does Hogan Knows Best, which, say what you want about that reality show. You can say it was a pioneer of reality television. I don't necessarily call it a pioneer of reality television. I feel like that honor goes to shows like Fear Factor. Fear Factor was essentially the OG reality show. But you can put Hogan Knows Best in that category, as well as the Osbournes. But then, of course, he has a nasty divorce, and then it was terrible. He goes to TNA, has a lackluster run in TNA. A lot of people consider Hogan and Bischoff going to TNA as one of the things that essentially killed the old TNA, which is very true. I don't want to necessarily say that they killed it themselves. They were there to make money, rightfully so. I feel like you have to put the blame on the people that were in charge. I think you had to put the blame on Dixie Carter. You had to put the blame on Vince Russo. You had to put the blame on all those people. It's not just Hogan and Bischoff. But then, of course, Hogan comes back to the company in 2014. He had that great moment at WrestleMania 30. And what happens? The stuff leaks, and we already talked about that. Horrible stuff. He was actually kicked out. I don't want to say kicked out of the Hall of Fame, but they took him out of the Hall of Fame. They essentially Chris Benoit Hulk Hogan. They Chris Benoit Hulk Hogan. What do I mean when WWE Chris Benoit somebody? That means they erased them from history, and they did erase them from history for a couple of years for the things that he said, the vulnerable and nasty things that he said. They were horrible things that he said. He comes back to the company, I believe, in like 2018, 2019, and he would make some appearances there and there. Fairly recently, He did the he started he had his Real American Beer, which I don't know how that's going to work out now considering he's passed. Of course, he was a part of the new wrestling league, the amateur wrestling league called the Real American Freestyle Wrestling, which I don't know how that's going to run now that Hulk Hogan is gone. I'm not saying that he was running the entire base operations of the promotion. I feel like that was just to market it, but I don't know how that's going to work now, considering he's gone. But that was what he was really doing. He had multiple shops over in Florida, Hogan's Beach Shop. I actually had the privilege a couple of years ago to go down to Hogan's Beach Shop over in Orlando. And dude, I'm not going to lie, man. I had a blast going to Hogan's Beach Shop. I had a blast. But when it comes to Hulk Hogan, what are my thoughts at the end of the day? Hulk Hogan was not a perfect human being by any stretch of the imagination. He was not. And if anything, Terry Bollea, the person, is vastly different from Hulk Hogan, the character. Vastly different from Hulk Hogan, the character. And in my opinion, I genuinely believe this, even though Hulk Hogan did the things that he did, we still at least have to have some sort of respect for Hulk Hogan for his contributions to the wrestling industry. Yeah, I said it. His contributions to the wrestling industry. Because at the end of the day, without Hulk Hogan, we probably wouldn't be here right now. I don't care what you think about Hulk Hogan. You have the right to express your opinion on Hulk Hogan as a person. But you cannot ignore the things that he has accomplished. Without Hulk Hogan, you probably wouldn't be a wrestling fan. Now, I didn't become a wrestling fan because of Hulk Hogan. I became a wrestling fan because of guys like John Cena. But without Hulk Hogan, there would be no John Cena. And without Hulk Hogan, if you really look at it, hindsight is 2020, we all probably wouldn't be here. Wrestling wouldn't be as big as it is today. And also, keep in mind, Hulk Hogan, and I was listening to many different podcasts, and this is very true. Hulk Hogan made Vince McMahon millions of dollars. But that same investment in Hulk Hogan almost put Vince McMahon out of business. And ironically, Hulk Hogan was not at the forefront of one wrestling boom period. He was at the forefront of two wrestling boom periods. Of course, in the 80s, with the Rock and Wrestling Connection, MTV, Cyndi Lauper, all that stuff. But he reinvented his career in the 90s as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Keep in mind, the 90s were vastly different from the 1980s because in the 1990s, it was an era of rebelliousness. Hip-hop music was running wild. Grunge rock was the thing. WCW catered more towards a young adult audience. Guys my age, guys in college fraternities would sit down and watch Nitro and watch what the NWO was going to do. And Hulk Hogan was the forefront of that. And with the creation of the NWO ultimately led to the creation of the Attitude Era. Hulk Hogan had major contributions to the wrestling industry, and they are contributions that cannot be ignored. Yes, he said some very nasty things, and we should not ignore that either. Hulk Hogan as a person was very flawed. Very flawed, and you have the right, and I said this multiple times, you have the right to express your opinion, but you cannot ignore his accomplishments. My thoughts and prayers go out to Hulk Hogan's family, Terry Bollea's family. They must be grieving. My thoughts and prayers go out to Hogan's friends and the people that he worked with. Because, again, we lost an icon. The wrestling industry lost an icon, but not only that, the general public lost an American icon. Lost, I don't want to say a superhero, because that'd be a little bit too much, but we lost somebody who, for his time, was huge and embodied what pop culture was, and that was Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, at the end of the day, will be vastly missed by a lot of people. Not by everybody, but by a lot of people. At the end of the day, we need to celebrate Hulk Hogan for the accomplishments that he's made to the wrestling industry. Say what you want about the guy. The guy is not perfect. But at the end of the day, Hulk Hogan made wrestling what it is today. This is the WrestleHavoc podcast. It is Sunday, July 27th, 2025. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this podcast. We got a lot more to talk about right here on the show. Of course, we're going to be talking about Goldberg. We're going to be talking about TNA Slammiversary and a whole lot more right here on the WrestleHavoc podcast. Before we get into more of the craziness, we're already, 43 minutes into this podcast. Of course, please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications, and be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc channel in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the Virgin referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. We got a new layout, man. We got full screen. We look more professional. We got a new camera. Bro, we got a lot of new things right here on the podcast. But that's what we do. We evolve, because that's what you got to do. You got to evolve. But without any further ado, let's get straight into more of the wrestling talk right here on the WrestleHavoc podcast. Wow, we've spent the first 44 minutes of the show talking about Hulk Hogan. Yeah, we spent the first 44 minutes of this show talking about Hulk Hogan. This was arguably the biggest story of the entire week. And it's probably going to be one of the biggest stories of the entire year. And probably one of the biggest stories in all of professional wrestling. AEW was under hot water today. They were under, not today, but AEW was under hot water this week after Hulk Hogan's passing, because before Collision went on the air, keep in mind, Hulk Hogan passed on Thursday. AEW didn't put out a statement on social media. And it sparked a lot of conversations on social media about how AEW is disrespectful, this and that. A lot of these people are pointing to a situation that happened all the way back during the pandemic in 2020. This was AEW's second year of existence. And Tony Khan replied to a tweet, I believe, on social media, and he stated that he is banning, and he banned Hulk Hogan and his wife out of all AEW shows. They essentially banned Hulk Hogan and his wife from all AEW shows. Now, keep in mind, AEW had nothing to do with Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan had absolutely nothing to do with AEW. None of them had to do with one another at all. So on one hand, now keep in mind, this was before Tony Schiavone came on Collision and mentioned Hulk Hogan. Everybody was jumping the train about how dare AEW do this and that, blah, blah, blah. And I was one of those people that, in a way, held my opinion to myself because, again, AEW could easily put out some sort of statement on Collision. Well, they did. They didn't put a graphic in the beginning of the show, but they had the perfect spokesman to pay tribute to Hulk Hogan, and that man was Tony Schiavone. Tony Schiavone on Collision stated this, and I quote, "It was quite the week for all of us who have been in professional wrestling for a long time, with the unexpected death of Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was a man who brought professional wrestling into the mainstream in the 80s, and in the 90s, right here on this network, right here on TNT almost 30 years ago. I liked that he mentioned that. Hulk Hogan lit the fire that began the Monday Night Wars. And he also put WCW on the cable TV map right here on TNT. And this was the most important thing that he stated throughout this entire, statement that he said about Hulk Hogan. And, sometimes we take a look at these stars that are bigger than life and we forget that they are just like us, human. And we forget that they have families that care about them. Our condolences go out to Hulk's family, his children Brooke and Nick, his wife Sky, and if you've never lost a member of your family, you have no idea what the pain they are going through right now. And believe you me, it is intense. From all of us here at All Elite Wrestling, RIP, brother." That was what Tony Schiavone stated last night on AEW Collision. And it was honestly the best thing that AEW could have said about Hulk Hogan. They had Tony Schiavone, a man who has worked with Hulk Hogan in the same organization back in the 90s with World Championship Wrestling, talk about Hulk Hogan. And he mentioned his work on TNT, which is, of course, the network that airs AEW Collision, but also aired WCW in the 90s, especially Nitro. I believe that was the only show that aired on TNT, WCW Nitro. Every other WCW program was on TBS. Nitro was on TNT. I don't know why I mentioned that, but I just wanted to point that out there. But he mentioned that, and it shut a lot of people up. This whole thing, in my opinion, exposed the stupidity with a lot of people. I think Tony Schiavone talking about Hulk Hogan was the best possible thing that AEW could have done. Because if they didn't say anything about Hulk Hogan, in my opinion, it would have been just flat out disrespectful, in my opinion. Even though Hulk Hogan had nothing to do with the formation of AEW, had nothing to do with AEW as a whole, I think it was in AEW's best interest. I think it was in AEW's best interest to put out some sort of statement. And Tony Schiavone was the right man for the job. Tony Schiavone was the right man for the job. This whole thing with Tony Schiavone talking about Hulk Hogan exposed a lot of people. It exposed the people that used a man's death to fuel their narrative. That's what it did. A lot of people look really stupid right now. They really do. They look really stupid. These people that complained about AEW not putting out a quote-unquote statement about Hulk Hogan look really dumb right now. All that complaining for the last 2 days before Collision, on Thursday and Friday, was all for nothing. It was all for nothing. These people are brain dead and they're stupid. And I do not know why these people have a platform. That's just my opinion. But AEW put out a statement and that's it. That's all they needed to do. And they did that. So can we all move on? Can we all move on from this tribalistic BS? And look, I've been on record on many shows before talking about that. I hate the word tribalism because everybody uses it. But in this case, I will. I don't care. People are using Hulk Hogan's death to really fuel their tribalistic narrative, and it's disgusting. It is really, really, really disgusting. WWE also did a tribute show to Hulk Hogan this past Friday on SmackDown. The SmackDown, which was pretty good. I really enjoyed SmackDown for what it was. The video package that they did on Hulk Hogan was perfect, in my opinion. It was a really good video package. And WWE did everything that they needed to do to pay tribute to the legend that was Hulk Hogan. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Again, my thoughts and prayers go out to Hogan's family, his wife, and of course, his friends and family, all that stuff. Rest in peace to the Hulkster, Hulk Hogan. TNA Slammiversary. TNA Slammiversary is in the history books, and TNA Slammiversary was arguably TNA's biggest show to date. They set a live attendance record of 7,623. This was their largest show. Keep in mind, this was their largest show in North America in the company's 23-year history. And a lot of that had to do, and a lot of the reason as to why a lot of tickets were sold fairly quickly, especially during the days leading up to the show, was because of one man and one man only. And that man was AJ Styles. AJ Styles, of course, made his return to TNA. Now, granted, I feel like it would have been better if AJ Styles' return was a surprise. But if you look at it from a business lens, it makes total sense as to why AJ Styles' return was announced beforehand. It was because TNA needed to sell tickets to the show. Because keep in mind, tickets for Slammiversary came out months ago. And I believe the capacity was like around like 4,000 or 5,000 at the time. And they almost, I believe their attendance record, they almost hit 8,000, which is absolutely great. It's great for TNA. If anything, it shows that TNA is the major number 3 promotion right here in the United States. But in terms of their ticket sales, this wasn't a show that sold out immediately. AJ Styles was the sole reason as to why TNA Slammiversary sold the way that it did, especially in the days leading up to the show. And unfortunately, people are going to deny that. But we're going to be talking about AJ Styles. We're going to be discussing briefly Slammiversary, but first I'm going to be talking about AJ Styles because AJ Styles, of course, was in the news. And, of course, AJ Styles made his return at TNA Slammiversary. He made his return to the company immediately after Moose's match with Leon Slater for the X Division Championship. And essentially his whole promo was just him putting over Leon Slater, which is phenomenal. No pun intended. He stated this, and I quote, "It's been a long road. Here I am in this ring, in this company where my name was built. I am the phenomenal AJ Styles. There was a time where they said you may not be able to come back, but here I am. I'm telling you, the lights are a little brighter here, the crowd is a little bit louder here, and the talent is better than it's ever been." He ends up putting over Leon Slater, and this was, of course, after the match with Moose, because Leon Slater is your new TNA X Division champion. Now, what's interesting about this whole thing was the fact that, number one, he came out to Get Ready to Fly. He came out to Get Ready to Fly, and to me, that is his best theme song ever, in my opinion. Get Ready to Fly is AJ Styles' best theme song, period. You know, I know Demigods is up there. I love Demigods, which was his ROH theme, but still, Get Ready to Fly is iconic. And he came out to that, and you had the crowd at the UBS Arena singing Get Ready to Fly. They were singing I am. It was amazing stuff. And it almost brought a tear to my eye because, again, TNA was the house that AJ Styles built. AJ Styles, I don't want to compare him to John Cena, but he's essentially the John Cena of TNA. Whenever you think of a promotion like TNA, you think of a guy like AJ Styles. You think of a guy like AJ Styles. Now, during that promo, what's funny is that during that promo, this is hilarious. During that promo, AJ Styles, he heard a lot of chants of one more match, one more match, one more match. And the funny thing about that was that AJ Styles actually responded to those chants, and he says, "Let me talk about Leon Slater. We'll get to that match. We'll get to that match later." Only to find out that he never really got to that match. He never talked about that whole match. He just put over Leon Slater, and then he left, which was funny. He put over Leon Slater, and he left. Now, what's interesting about this whole AJ Styles deal with TNA is that this was actually not the original plan. The original plan for AJ Styles was to have some sort of program with Frankie Kazarian. I'm reading this from SEScoops.com. The original source is John Alba of Sports Illustrated's The Takedown. This is according to John Alba of Sports Illustrated, and I'm reading this from SEScoops.com. Multiple TNA sources indicated that the former WWE champion was originally expected to be a part of a segment involving another TNA original, Frankie Kazarian. However, those plans, quote-unquote, shifted in the hours before the event. The report added that some sources in TNA believed WWE may have had some input on the change, not wanting to promise a future TNA match for one of their main roster stars that they would not be able to deliver on. Yeah. Now, what do I think about that whole scenario? It clearly shows that this whole partnership is one-sided. Now, granted, the WWE partnership has benefited TNA greatly. If you think otherwise, you are a fool. This partnership with WWE benefited TNA greatly, but I've always said this. Eventually, I believe in the next couple of years, WWE will eventually purchase the assets of TNA. I don't know how, but there's in some way, shape, or form in the next couple of years, WWE will purchase the assets of TNA. They will purchase the assets of TNA, and that's just a harsh reality. But, of course, there's some instances where clearly this whole partnership with WWE and TNA is a little one-sided because, of course, WWE is going to have the say because they are the larger company with a lot of these things. But at the end of the day, this partnership with WWE is benefiting TNA. Look at the house that they drew this past Sunday at Slammiversary. Just look at the house. Almost 8,000 people at the UBS Arena. That is an accomplishment in and of itself. Now, granted, it took them 23 years It took them 23 years, but all power to TNA. Let's do the results for TNA Slammiversary real quick. Ash and Heather by Elegance defeated Cassie Lee and Jessie McKay for the TNA Knockouts World Tag Team Championships. The Hometown Man defeated Eric Young on the pre-show. Both of those matches were on the pre-show, by the way. As well as Josh Bishop, Real One, and Zilla Fatu. Yes, Real One, the former Enzo Amore, showed up at TNA Slammiversary in the pre-show, but I will say his promo was not really the best. And they defeated Jake Something, Mance Warner, and Steve Backlund. That was also on the pre-show. On the main card, we had Mustafa Ali for taking on Cedric Alexander, which was a fantastic match, by the way. Great opener. Mustafa Ali ended up getting the win. Matt Cardona and Brian Myers and Eddie Edwards and JDC defeated Cutler James, Dion Lennox, and Orsis Griffin and Shaquan Sugars. My apologies with that. I don't watch TNA on a weekly basis. Indy Hartwell defeated Tessa Blanchard. And after that, Tessa Blanchard went absolutely ballistic. And ironically, during this whole match, the entire crowd was chanting, "She's a racist." They were chanting, "She's a racist" at Tessa Blanchard. Yeah. But after that, they did a post-match angle, and really that was the major story. Tessa Blanchard put her hands on the interviewer, and she just went absolutely ballistic to the point where Santino Marella, in kayfabe, suspended Tessa Blanchard. JC Jane. Remember when we all said that JC Jane was going to be a transitional champion? Well, JC Jane defeated Masha Slamovich for the TNA Knockouts World Championship and the NXT Women's Championship. JC Jane, a couple months ago when Mariah May came in to WWE. Was it last month or 2 months ago? I believe it was last month. Mariah May came into WWE. She's a part of the NXT roster. She's now known as Blake Monroe. All of a sudden, now, JC Jane is a double champion. We all thought that this woman was going to be a transitional champion once Mariah May showed up on NXT. Well, JC Jane is holding both the NXT and TNA women's titles. Yeah. Leon Slater defeated Moose for the TNA X Division Championship. Leon Slater, of course, was put over by a returning AJ Styles, which we talked about earlier. Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy, the Hardy Boys, defeated Nick Nemeth and Ryan Nemeth, Myron Reed and Zachary Wentz, AJ Francis and KC Navarro in a four-way ladder match for the TNA World Tag Team Championships. Of course, this match is best known for all the crazy bumps that AJ Francis took. He literally landed on a ladder, literally fell, and his whole entire leg went through the ladder. That, in my opinion, was just flat out painful. This guy also hit a freaking moonsault. A moonsault. Now, we've seen botches before from AJ Francis, but bro, that moonsault that AJ Francis hit was crazy. Now, it wasn't necessarily a botch, but you get my drift. And in the main event, and arguably the stupidest decision that TNA could have made, in my opinion, Trick Williams defeated Joe Hendry and Mike Santana, and he retains his TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Okay. Why is this a bad move, in my opinion? A lot of the argument that a lot of people are going to make, there's a lot of arguments that a lot of people are going to make regarding this decision. A lot of people always say, oh, they're going to wait till Bound for Glory. Oh, you know, they're just trying to build up Mike Santana. They're trying to build up Mike Santana to for the chase because the money is always on the chase. And they are right. The money is always on the chase. It is. They are not lying when they say that. The money is always on the chase because, again, it gets people invested. It gets people invested in the product and what they're watching. But this instance is very different. Bound for Glory is going to be in Lowell, Massachusetts at the Tsongas Center this October, I believe. And I may be totally wrong. I may be in denial, but I don't know if TNA is ever going to draw the house that they did at Slammiversary this past Sunday. Almost 8,000 people at the UBS Arena. Now, keep in mind, the capacity for the UBS Arena is almost around 20,000. Bound for Glory is at Lowell, Massachusetts. Bound for Glory, if you really think about it, is essentially their WrestleMania, their biggest show of the year. Always was like that for the past 20 plus years. It was always like that. But in this case, this year's a little different considering Slammiversary was their highest attended show in the company's history. So if you really think about it, Slammiversary was kind of their biggest show of the year, even though in reality, Bound for Glory is their biggest show of the year. In my opinion, Bound for Glory being at the Songa Center to me is a little bit disappointing. And if they're building towards Bound for Glory, why? Oh, why would they have Mike Santana win the World Heavyweight Championship in Lowell, Massachusetts? Keep in mind, these people were in Long Island, New York. They were in the state of New York. Who is a proud New Yorker? You're talking about Mike Santana. Mike Santana is a proud New Yorker. The entire crowd was rooting for Mike Santana to get the win. Nobody wanted Joe Hendry to win. Nobody wanted Trick Williams to win. Everybody wanted Mike Santana to go over and win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. That is what everybody paid the pay-per-view for. Everybody paid for Slammiversary. They paid, what was it, $30 to $40 for Slammiversary just for Mike Santana to get his moment. Actually, people paid for two reasons and two reasons only. One reason was Mike Santana, and the second reason was AJ Styles. That's it. And probably the majority of the people that purchased Slammiversary were people that watch TNA on a regular basis. I don't watch TNA on a regular basis. I only watch their big shows. There's the market for wrestling is so crowded at the moment, which is a good thing, but at the same time, I don't have a lot of time to watch all this wrestling. But still, Mike Santana should have gotten the win in front of his home state of New York. Should have gotten the win in front of 8,000 people. We do not know if TNA is going to draw a large enough crowd in the future. I hope they do. I hope that they do. I'm being serious. I hope that they do. But I feel like TNA fumbled big time by not having Mike Santana get the win. I understand that there is quote unquote money in the chase. But let's be honest with ourselves. How many pay-per-view buys do you think Slammiversary even drew? But still, Mike Santana should have gotten the win, end of story. To me, it was a joke, and the fact that Trick Williams got the win, I mean, I like Trick Williams, he's super over, but come on, it set a bad precedent. It set a bad look. It literally, it was a bad look on TNA's end. Because if you really think about it, the perception now is that TNA, even though it's true, TNA is WWE's younger brother. That's what it is. TNA does what the older brother tells them to do. That's the perception that a lot of people are getting when it comes to this whole scenario with Mike Santana not winning the TNA World Championship. Now you have two instances where WWE contracted talent are holding TNA championships. NXT talent, per se. Trick Williams and JC Jane. Nothing against both people. Nothing against both wrestlers. They're great at what they do in NXT. But this is TNA we're talking about. I know a lot of people say, oh, but this is going to lead to an invasion angle. This is going to lead to an invasion angle. An invasion angle? Who gives a shit? An invasion angle. An invasion angle. We're talking about Mike Santana here. We're talking about Mike Santana. Mike Santana is the guy to be at the forefront of TNA. If there's anybody who has busted his ass, it is Mike Santana. Mike Santana deserved the moment that he should have gotten this past Sunday at Slammiversary. He should have been the guy to win in this triple threat match. Do I think he will win the World Heavyweight Championship eventually? Yeah, he will. Yes, he will. He will win the world title. There's no doubt about it. Mike Santana is guaranteed to win the TNA World Championship. But is the moment going to be right there? Is the moment going to be there? I don't know. I do not know. And you want to know another thing that bugs me? Another thing that bugs me about this whole scenario is the fact that TNA did the exact same thing last year on that exact same show. They did the same thing last year with Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry was literally not just the talk around TNA. He was the talk throughout the entire wrestling industry. Keep in mind, his video, his music video, his theme song was going viral on social media. Going viral on social media. And if there was any perfect moment to crown Joe Hendry as the TNA World Champion, it should have been at Slammiversary last year. The same people that said, oh yeah, he's gonna win the title. He's gonna win the title at Bound for Glory. Guess what happened? He did not win the title at Bound for Glory. They literally waited all the way until this year, up until Genesis, for Joe Hendry to win the World Championship. And some people, and they have the right to think this way, thought that it was a little too late. Mike Santana not winning at Slammiversary is the equivalent of what would have happened if AEW had Hangman Page lose at All In. If Hangman Page lost at All In and not win the AEW World Championship, dude, the backlash would have been freaking crazy. And rightfully so, because it was a stupid idea. Why would you wait on Darby Allin? Why would you wait on a guy like Darby Allin? No disrespect to Darby. But why are you going to wait for Darby Allin when you have Hangman Page right in front of you? This was the perfect opportunity to crown Mike Santana as the world champion, and TNA failed to capitalize on the moment. They failed miserably to capitalize on the moment. A lot of these promotions tend to fail to capitalize on the moment, and that is a major problem. If you have a moment right there, dead center, right in front of you, the easiest booking scenario that you could have done, it was book Mike Santana to win the world championship. In front of his friends, family, in front of the people of New York. Yes, it was in Long Island, but that's still in New York. In New York, you could have done that, and you didn't do it. Mike Santana will eventually win the world championship. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But the moment was staring them right in the face, and TNA just failed to capitalize. Their biggest show of the year took them 23 years to sell 8,000 tickets in the United States. 23 years. And they had to dust off the old TNA, the old Vince Russo TNA. LOL TNA, that's the running joke amongst TNA. It follows them everywhere. LOL TNA follows them everywhere. It follows them everywhere. In this case of LOL TNA, it has to go to Mike Santana not winning the world championship. To me, that was just a joke on TNA's end. A joke on TNA's end. It's hilarious in my opinion. Hilarious. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Slammiversary. Speaking of TNA, we got to talk about their television deal, because TNA, if you guys don't know, are actively looking to find a television platform. And according to Mike Johnson of PW Insider, we already know some of the networks that are being in talks with TNA. According to Mike Johnson of PW Insider, he stated this, and I quote, "I can confirm that before WWE landed on Tubi, TNA a while back was talking to Fox about having Impact airing weekly live on Tubi with the idea of building to big specials that would potentially air live on FS1. I don't know how far the talks went, but it was strong enough that TNA was budgeting out what their costs needed to be to air the shows. I can also tell you that amongst the least two sources I spoke to within WWE this month, there was a belief that A&E could end up being a potential home for TNA. That discussion has quieted over the last few weeks, but that doesn't mean that there are talks, that there are DOA, or that there aren't any other places that TNA could land. Keep this in mind. If the Paramount merger ever happens, they could be looking for programming that is cheaper to produce and will bring an audience. And pro wrestling is a lot cheaper, apparently, than keeping Stephen Colbert on the air. All that it takes is two sides wanting to be in business together and making a deal. We will see if TNA finds the right one. Their president, Carlos Silva, has pegged a potential deal as happening in perhaps 90 days, which leads up to the fall season of television. And according to Mike Johnson, he states this, and I quote, "I'm hoping that it happens." Me too. I'm hoping that this possible deal is happening because, again, people need to understand, in order for TNA to grow, and they're growing in terms of their attendance and popularity, and the WWE partnership is benefiting TNA greatly. And I said this earlier, it's benefiting TNA greatly. Not only that, they're in talks with many different networks to air their Impact show on a weekly basis. That is great. Access TV, unfortunately, is a small network. TNA is never going to grow if they stay on Access TV. Access TV, if you really think about it, has a lot of music type programming on that channel. I believe Access TV also used to be HDNet. They used to be HDNet, but Access TV, regardless, is not a major television platform. It's just not. Not to mention their parent company, Anthem Sports and Entertainment. I believe they own the Fight Network over in Canada. They flat out purchased Access TV. They purchased Access TV outright. They purchased Access TV outright just to put Impact on the air. Think about that. Now TNA is in a position where they're able to talk to multiple different television outlets. This is nothing but good news for the industry. I've said my fair share on TNA many times, and I will continue to say my fair share of TNA, just like I will say my fair share on WWE, just like I will say my fair share on AEW at numerous times. But TNA possibly landing on a major television platform, from what it looks like, it's either A&E or Tubi. Say what you want about Tubi. Tubi's free. It's a much easier way to watch TNA because not a lot of people have Access TV. Not only that, we live in an age of streaming. We are under the streaming age right now. We are living in the streaming age right now. People need to understand that people are cutting the cord. People are cutting the cord. Television is evolving into streaming. That's the reality of things. And we could possibly see scenarios of TNA possibly landing on a different streaming service. We have absolutely no idea. And if they do land this deal, how are they going to distribute their pay-per-views? Are their pay-per-views going to be involved in this whole scenario? We do not know. But what's interesting is that a potential deal could be done in 90 days. And those 90 days leads to the eventual fall season. And as you guys all know, when it comes to television networks, the fall season is where normally all of these networks bring out their new lineups of programming. So we're going to have to wait and see. I was thinking of networks like maybe FX or even Paramount Network. And I say Paramount Network because that used to be Spike. But who knows? Maybe those are in talks. But from what it looks like, the lead apparently is probably A&E. Now, what's interesting is that A&E airs WWE programming. They air the LFG program. They air a lot of their wrestler documentaries, which are not bad, by the way. They're really good. They have Hidden Treasures, I believe that's what it's called. I don't watch the A&E shows, but some people do. And from the research from the research that I conducted, apparently those shows draw roughly around 100 to 200,000 viewers per week, which, if you compare it to what TNA is doing now on Access TV, I mean, it's roughly around the same range of viewership. But who knows? Maybe TNA could bring in a larger audience to A&E. I mean, wrestling is a very niche audience, regardless. It's a very niche audience, but with the right platform, TNA is able to grow. With the right platform, TNA is able to grow. Apparently, they're asking for $10 million. That's like the asking price. And for TNA standards, if you compare it to WWE, honestly, for TNA, it's not that bad of a number. It's not really large of a number. I mean, $10 million is a lot of money. But if you compare it to the asking price of like WWE or the amount of money WWE is making just on these television contracts alone, I mean, WWE is getting paid billions of dollars across multiple different television outlets. I'm talking about Netflix. I'm talking about NBC Universal, which airs, of course, SmackDown on the USA Network, which, of course, also has quarterly Saturday Night's Main Event on NBC. The CW is paying them millions of dollars as well. TNA is getting exposure just by being on the CW network, which airs NXT. The WWE partnership has benefited TNA greatly, and now they're on the verge of possibly taking Impact to another platform, a much larger platform than Access TV. It may be Tubi, it may be A&E, it may be somebody else. We do not know. But this is great for the wrestling industry at the end of the day. I've said my fair share of TNA, I've said my fair share of WWE, I've said my fair share of AEW. But this is great for the business. Is it going to oversaturate the market with a lot of wrestling? Yes, it is. It is. But if you are a wrestler, this is nothing but great news. It's nothing but great news because if TNA goes on a large television platform, a larger television platform than Access TV, it gives them the opportunity to showcase their talent on a national level. A third option to showcase their talent on a national level. We are now entering, if this is true, from what it looks like it is, if this is true, we might be entering the age, once again, of the big three. You know how in the late 90s, primarily 99 and 2000, you had three major promotions on three major television platforms. WWE on the USA Network and on UPN, WCW on the Turner Networks, and of course ECW on TNN, which later became Spike TV. Now, granted, ECW and the TNN relationship was very toxic, and some people even made the argument, and rightfully so, that the TNN deal single-handedly killed ECW, which is very true, ironically. But we may be entering once again in the age of the big three. We're going to have three major wrestling promotions on national television platforms. WWE's on Netflix, the CW, the USA Network, NBC quarterly. NBC quarterly, I mean. AEW is on TBS, TNT, and Max. And if you watch their pay-per-views, they're also on Amazon Prime. TNA now is on Access TV, and they have the opportunity to go on a major television platform. It just depends on the right deal for them. TNA is not going to make the same amount of money that AEW makes. They're not going to make the same amount of money that WWE makes. And that actually leads to my next discussion. My next discussion is actually on Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff went on the Ariel Helwani show. And he stated this, and I quote, "TNA is one deal away from being a major player," Bischoff declared. "If they get a broadcast partner, they get the right broadcast situation, they've got the product, they know what they're doing, there's a good team of people, they just need a bigger platform. And if they get it, watch them take off." What does he mean by that? Well, on that same interview, he flat out stated that TNA could easily, if they get a major television platform, they're able to surpass AEW as the number 2 promotion in the United States. Now, look, I respect Eric Bischoff, and this was before Hogan's passing, but I'm just going to judge Bischoff on what he said here. Just by this. I respect Eric Bischoff because he brought tremendous eyeballs to the industry in the 90s, okay? He's had a lot of flaws in terms of his success rate in wrestling, but nobody can take away the success that he brought to WCW in the mid to late 90s. Nobody can take that away from him. Nobody can take that away from him. But with all due respect, Bischoff is wrong. Bischoff is 100% wrong. TNA at one point was the number 2 promotion in the United States. And I'm talking throughout the 2000s and in the early to mid 2010s. After they left Spike and they didn't get people make the assumption that they got canceled off of Spike. No. Spike TV did not renew TNA. They didn't get canceled off of Spike. They did not get renewed by Spike. And one of the main reasons as to why they no longer did business with Spike, or Spike no longer did business with TNA, was the single fact that TNA lied to their television partners. That's what happened. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen in this scenario, considering this is a different regime. This is a different regime. But still, even during TNA's peak, think about this. Even during TNA's peak, they still hadn't generated the amount of money that AEW has generated only 6 years being in business. TNA never generated the amount of money that AEW generates. And they probably never will, unfortunately. TNA is a distant number 3. From a budget standpoint, from a business standpoint, you may sit here and say that their product is better than AEW, and you know what? All power to you. Oh, but they sold 8,000 seats. Yeah, they sold 8,000 seats off of the back of AJ Styles. Because I believe they were at like maybe 5,000 or 6,000. They got an extra 2,000 people boost. They got extra 2,000 tickets out there off the back of AJ Styles just by making that announcement that AJ Styles was going to return to TNA Slammiversary. But think about this. In the United States, this is the key word. These are the key words. In the United States. Now, they did draw major houses in the UK. They drew huge houses in the UK. I believe it was Wembley Arena, not Stadium, Wembley Arena. They drew large houses in the UK. People don't talk about that, but they did. But it took 23 years for TNA to draw almost 8,000 people in a major arena. 23 years for TNA to draw 8,000 people, almost 8,000 people in a large arena here in the United States. 23 years. AEW, in their first show in their entire existence, sold out in like, what was it, 4 minutes, 2 minutes? That was when AEW was in demand. Nowadays, AEW is not really in demand, even though, they've been going through a down period. Let's not shy away from that. They've had their struggles the past couple of years, and I've been very open about it. Hell, my most viewed video on my channel was talking about the real reason behind AEW's decline. But even though AEW, people say, is going through a down period, on AEW's worst day, TNA is still a distant number 3. And AEW is still the number 2 promotion in the United States. What Eric Bischoff said on the Ariel Helwani show, in my opinion, was dumb. And I say this as an Eric Bischoff fan. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Eric Bischoff, but what he said on the Ariel Helwani show was nothing but gaga. Nothing but gaga. TNA cannot surpass AEW as the number 2 promotion. Oh, but the WWE partnership. Yes, WWE is essentially, they're treating TNA like their little pond. And them treating TNA like their little pond is actually benefiting TNA, and that's great. It's great for the industry. It's great. But TNA is not number 2. And ironically, the people that are constantly grifted saying like, oh my God, they're acting all tribalistic on social media. The anti-AEW marks on social media, constantly talking negatively about AEW. And you know what? You have the right to your opinion. I don't care. I've said my fair share about AEW. I actually enjoyed last year was the least I watched of AEW last year. I didn't care a lot about the product last year simply because of the fact that AEW was just dealing with a lot of stupidity. But they've been doing better this year. Not to mention, a lot of these anti-AEW accounts, I guarantee you, don't watch TNA. They don't watch TNA at all. Not to mention, if TNA was in the exact same position as AEW and TNA was making the same amount of money that AEW is making right now, they would have been against TNA. And that's a fact. That is a fact. But nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about that. Because again, people want to spread their narrative. TNA will never be the number 2 promotion in the United States. That is pure facts. Pure facts. TNA will never, never, never be the number 2 promotion in the United States because they are not backed by a billionaire family. They are not. They are backed by Anthem Sports and Entertainment. They're not willing to spend the amount of money that AEW was willing to spend. If they were willing to spend the amount of money that AEW was willing to spend, TNA would have probably gone under. That's just a harsh reality. And keep in mind, I do not want to see TNA go away because it's bad for the industry if any promotion goes away. I also don't want WWE to buy out TNA. Now, I don't know how that's going to go on considering, you know, there was this whole antitrust lawsuit. I don't know if I believe they settled. Correct me if I'm wrong with MLW. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may be totally wrong. But I've made the prediction on numerous occasions on this very podcast that WWE may buy out TNA in the next couple of years. Look what they did with AAA. Now, granted, AAA apparently was dealing with a lot of money issues, and WWE buying AAA actually helped AAA. But still, why did they buy AAA? Why did they buy AAA? They bought AAA. They bought AAA to break into the Mexican market, and it was smart. Not only that, they want to compete with CMLL. And of course, AAA and CMLL were competing with one another. And CMLL, from what I've read, has gone through a lot of... They've gone through essentially a renaissance throughout the past couple of years. And AAA needed to figure out a way to compete with CMLL. So what did they do? They had WWE buy, what was it, like 51% of the company? 51% of the company. And I believe by the third quarter, the deal is going to be done. Like, fully done. I think WWE will eventually buy out TNA in the next couple of years. I may be totally wrong. But even if WWE bought TNA, you're going to have people say that TNA is the number 2 promotion, even though WWE would have bought TNA by that point. That is not true. If WWE owned TNA, I wouldn't consider them as a number 2 promotion because they would have been under the WWE umbrella. That's just a harsh reality. If it is something under the WWE umbrella, you don't consider it as a separate promotion. You can just consider it a show under the WWE umbrella. But TNA, from where it is right now, they're in a much better place than they were 10 years ago. Not to mention, TNA, at the end of the day, is a distant number 3. That's the reality. They are the distant number 3. And they're fine in that spot. They're great in that spot. They are. There's nothing wrong with that. Just like TNA or just like AEW will never overtake WWE as number 1. AEW will never overtake WWE as number 1. They will never it will never happen. It will never happen. But TNA is in their little spot as the number 3. And that is a good spot for them. So Eric Bischoff is wrong, in my opinion. He's wrong. But that's my opinion on this whole matter. Continuing on with episode 13 of the WrestleHavoc podcast. It is Sunday, July 27th, 2025. We're going to be talking about Goldberg. Goldberg was in the news throughout the past couple of weeks because, of course, Goldberg recently had his retirement match, his last match at Saturday night's main event against Gunther. And it was a great match. It was a phenomenal match. It was a great match. Goldberg looked great. Goldberg looked phenomenal. But of course, we all know that right as Goldberg was about to cut his farewell speech, the feed cut off. And you cannot blame WWE for that. You have to blame NBC. Why is that? Well, there's a difference between being on cable television and network television. People can't grasp. They cannot grasp the difference between the two. Cable TV, if you're WWE and you're on cable TV, you might be able to go overtime. But network TV is a little bit different. Because with network TV, I'm talking about networks like NBC, Fox, CBS, those types of networks. Hell, even the CW. It's the same thing. CW is network TV. There's a thing called the local news. You have many different, in these individual territories, you have different affiliates. Like, for example, over here in the East Coast, in the state of New Jersey and New York, you got NBC4, you got Fox 5, you got Pix 11, you got CBS Channel 2. Those are the affiliates that I'm talking about. A lot of these networks have the local news. And if you are a live sporting event that is airing on prime time, that being on a network like NBC, you have to go off the air at 10 p.m. And unfortunately, Goldberg does not understand that. Well, he went on the Ariel Helwani show. He went on the Ariel Helwani show and expressed his displeasure on the whole scenario. He stated this, and I quote, "I would have loved for them to announce it in January and have a build-up to it and do something like that. That I thought it was maybe worth my career. But let's just say that they chose to do it in 3 weeks." Now, I will say, I thought WWE had built this match very lazy. They were very lazy when it came to the build for this match. They were. That I agree with Goldberg. WWE was very lazy with this match. They didn't need, like, they just had Goldberg out there and just challenge him for the world title. They didn't have some sort of story behind the whole situation, unfortunately. But Goldberg continued on, and he stated, "But let's just say they chose to do it in 3 weeks' notice. It is what it is. It's part of the package, part of the meal you get dealt. And I would be remiss in thinking that the meal would be different. But it's a shame on me for thinking it would be different. Don't you love the way that I've been able to navigate my words?" Continuing on what Goldberg said on the Ariel Helwani show, he stated this, and I quote, "Let's just say I'm pissed off at the way that I went out because I put so much into it, and I don't feel that the effort was reciprocated to put on a stamp on what I had accomplished," Goldberg said. Again, I'm not going to say that I'm not ecstatic about the opportunity that I got. I was a WCW guy. I don't know, man. I think it could have been done a little bit differently, that's all. I'm happy with my performance. I'm happy with the setting. But could it have been better? Absolutely. It can always be better. There's about 100 things that could have been better. I did 3 interviews beforehand. I did 3 in 6 months, you know? They cut me off 30 seconds into my speech, bro. You don't do that. But it's all good. It's all good. I know it is what it is. The match might have gone long, and this and that and whatever it is. But I just think it could have been a little classier prepared than it was. I'll just say that is a mild understatement. Come on, man. Goldberg thinks that he got his feed cut off on purpose. Goldberg in the same interview says he's not going to complain, but at the same time, he complains in this interview. I'm not going to sit here and discredit the work that Goldberg has done throughout his career. I'm only going to say the truth. Goldberg has made a career. Think about this. Goldberg throughout his whole career, and it's benefited him. It's benefited him. But a lot of what made Goldberg special in '98 was the fact that he did the bare minimum in his work. Keep in mind, Goldberg was very inexperienced when he was working in WCW '98 and '99, but really his peak was '98. He made his debut in '97, but his peak was '98. His initial run in the WWE in 2003 was, let's just say, a disaster. A lot of people did not like him in the locker room. He had a disastrous last match in that first run against Brock Lesnar. He comes back to the company in 2016. He had a shocking match against Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series, which shocked a lot of freaking people. He had a great match with Brock at WrestleMania 33, ultimately redeeming their match at WrestleMania 20. And then all of a sudden, he just starts returning left and right all for these Saudi Arabia shows. Now, granted, you have to blame Vince McMahon for that because it was his idea, not Goldberg's. I mean, if you're Goldberg, you're literally getting paid millions of dollars to do the bare minimum. All power to you. All power to you. But Goldberg, the send-off that he got at Saturday Night's Main Event was probably the best send-off that any wrestler could have possibly have gotten. Yes, I thought them cutting off Goldberg from his farewell speech sucked. It sucked. It really did. It sucked. And a large portion of that had to do with the fact that there was a lot of freaking commercials on NBC. When you watch Saturday Night's Main Event, man, the commercials are unbearable. It's like every 2 to 3 minutes, there's always a commercial break. That's just the nature of the beast. You're on network TV. It is what it is. Goldberg coming out on the Ariel Helwani show. I mean, keep in mind, the entire show of Saturday Night's Main Event a couple of weeks ago was dedicated to Goldberg. They would air video packages on Goldberg. All of that. The entire episode was dedicated to a WCW. Think about this. The most WWE show, that being Saturday Night's Main Event. The most WWE show, that being Saturday Night's Main Event, was dedicated to a WCW guy on NBC. Goldberg had a great send-off. And his match against Goldberg, a lot of people tend to say that whenever Goldberg wrestles long matches, he tends to get exposed. And that is very true. That is very true. But I was listening to the Stevie Richards show, or the Steven Richards show. He's great at what he does. I love his channel. And he flat out stated that even though this match was a long match, out of all of the long matches where Goldberg got exposed, the match that he had against Gunther, which was a 10-plus minute match, was the least that he got exposed. Goldberg made this man look like $1 million, and that is what makes Gunther great. I tend to get them confused. Both Gunther Goldberg. They both start with the G. Gunther is not only phenomenal in the ring, but one of the main reasons why I like Goldberg's Gunther. It's Gunther. A lot of the main reasons as to why I like Gunther so much is because of the fact that he's able to make anybody look good. It could be, he literally work with the most inexperienced wrestler ever, and that inexperienced wrestler will look great in the process to the point where you, the viewer, would not even notice a peep. And we saw that with Goldberg, and it was a great match. A great match. Yes, his farewell speech got cut off, but that was not WWE's fault. That was because they were on NBC. They were on NBC. They had to. It's not like WWE did this on purpose. Not to mention, we do not know the nature of Seth Rollins' injury, whether that is a work or a shoot. A lot of people are leaning towards the fact that it's probably a work, and it may be the case. But if Seth Rollins' injury is actually real, which very well could be the possibility, WWE was scrambling in terms of their production of the show because the LA Knight and Seth Rollins match ended the way that it did because of his injury. They needed to scramble. Yes, WWE cut the feed roughly right as soon as Goldberg was giving his farewell speech. But they didn't intentionally do it. They did not intentionally cut off Goldberg. Why? Because he was a WCW? No. WCW is dead. WCW has been dead for well over 20 years. Well over 20 years. Nobody cares about WCW anymore. I'm sorry. You can go back and watch WCW, but WCW is dead, bro. It's dead. It drives me crazy every time WWE talks about the impact of the Monday Night Wars in the 90s with all these documentaries and stuff. It drives me crazy because it's constant, repetition of the same history over and over and over again. I get it. But I tend to move forward to the future. Goldberg was not sabotaged. If anything, Goldberg's send-off was very generous on WWE's end. Very generous on WWE's end. WWE posted the farewell speech that Goldberg conducted on their social media platforms immediately after Saturday Night's Main Event went off the air on NBC. Immediately after WWE went off the air on NBC, WWE posted Goldberg's farewell speech on their social media platforms. A social media platform, by the way, that garners millions of views. WWE has one of the largest social media platforms out there. Yes, NBC is a large platform, but their platforms on social media are just as big. And a lot of people got to see it on social media. This is the future right here. This is not even the future, bro. This is the present. This is the present. So what is Goldberg complaining about? He had a great send-off. WWE did everything in their power to make Goldberg look like $1 million. And the fact that Goldberg crapped all over it a couple of days later on the Ariel Helwani show, to me, is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Be honest with yourselves. Now, in that same interview, he flat out stated that, oh, they wouldn't do that to Cena. They wouldn't do that to The Undertaker. Bro, you're not The Undertaker. Hell, you're not even John Cena. If you're WWE and you have two guys that are on the verge of retirement next to each other, which one are you going to prioritize? Are you going to prioritize John Cena's retirement, or are you going to prioritize Goldberg's retirement? You're going to prioritize John Cena's retirement. You're going to prioritize John Cena's retirement. That's just the harsh reality if you're Goldberg. That is. I don't know why Goldberg said the things that he said on the Ariel Helwani show. He also said that his contract was up in a couple of weeks, and I believe his contract from this date, which is now July 27th, I believe his contract is up this week or next week. Correct me if I'm wrong. He said he's going to spill the beans. What does he mean by that? Is he under an NDA? What? We're going to have to wait and see. But there was also a lot of talk of Goldberg possibly going to AEW once his WWE contract is up, and maybe having another match there. Why would Goldberg go to AEW? Why? I think him going to AEW would probably tarnish his legacy. I actually believe that. I believe Goldberg going to AEW would tarnish his legacy. All that work WWE did in giving you the best send-off you could possibly get, only for you to go to AEW because your last match didn't end off the way that you wanted, so you wanted to have another great last match over in the other place. I mean, it's just a bad look. It's just a bad look. Not to mention, I believe he did have a meeting with Tony Khan a couple of years ago. Not only that, Tony Khan spoke very highly of Goldberg, but Goldberg didn't. Yeah. Goldberg didn't. He was on the Ariel Helwani show, and he was like, it's not my cup. It's not, I don't like that product, that blah, blah. He just said bad things about AEW. So again, why is he going to go there? Why would he go there? Just saying. The send-off that he had at Saturday night's main event was the best possible send-off for Goldberg. Don't ruin it by going somewhere else. That's just my opinion. But those are my thoughts on Goldberg. All right, moving on with the WrestleHavoc podcast. And this is going to be our final topic. We're going to be talking about WWE SummerSlam. Of course, SummerSlam is a 2-night event, and it's surprisingly this weekend. In my home state, the greatest state in the world, New Jersey. Yeah. New Jersey is the greatest state in the world. Well, we got the full cards for both the Saturday show and the Sunday show. And I'm actually at the belief that SummerSlam is actually going to be better than WrestleMania. I genuinely believe that. SummerSlam Saturday, we got Sami Zayn taking on Karrion Kross. Jelly Roll and Randy Orton versus Logan Paul and Drew McIntyre. Roman Reigns and Jey Uso taking on Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed. We got the women's tag team titles on the line as Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez, who are the current champions, will be defending their titles against the unlikely duo Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss. We got the women's tag team titles on the line as Tiffany Stratton will be defending her title against Jade Cargill. And in the main event, we got Gunther defending his World Heavyweight Championship against CM Punk. Could this be the scenario in which Seth Rollins shockingly makes his return and cashes in his Money in the Bank? We're going to have to wait and see. We do not know if the whole thing is a work or a shoot. I genuinely believe that his injury is real. I may be totally wrong. But again, take that with a grain of salt. SummerSlam Sunday. The crowd, in my opinion, actually looks really decent for Sunday. Compared to Saturday, honestly, I mean, more people are going to care about the Sunday show. But the Saturday show is not bad. But we got the women's world title on the line as Naomi will be defending her title against Rhea Ripley and Io Sky. That match I'm looking forward to. That match is going to be fantastic. Of course, Rhea Ripley and Io Sky before the Naomi cash-in at the Evolution show tore the frickin' house down. And I genuinely believe that this match is going to tear the house down as well. We got the Women's Intercontinental Championship on the line as Becky Lynch will be defending her title against Lyra Valkyria. I've said my fair share about the direction of the Women's Intercontinental title. I'm digging the direction of the Women's Intercontinental Championship because if you compare the Women's Intercontinental Championship to the Women's U.S. title and the Women's Tag Team titles, the Women's Intercontinental title has the more focus. It has the most focused. And a large portion of that has to do with the feud between Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria. We got the U.S. title on the line as Solo Sikoa will be defending his title against Jacob Fatu. We got the Intercontinental title on the line as Dominic Mysterio will be defending his title against AJ Styles. And we got the WWE Championship on the line as John Cena will be defending his title against Cody Rhodes in a street fight. Now, what could possibly happen? I see a lot of people saying that this match could end up in a double turn. Cody Rhodes is going to turn heel. Cody Rhodes is going to turn heel. I don't think that is going to be the case. Cody Rhodes should not turn heel. I don't care what Cody Rhodes should not turn heel. I said that right here on my show. Cody Rhodes should not turn heel. It's way too early for that. Way too early for Cody Rhodes to turn heel. I will say this. There could be a high possibility of John Cena turning back as a babyface because we're close to December. We are close to December. And December is looming around the corner. December is going to be John Cena's last match. And we need to understand that John Cena is not going to go out as a heel. He is just not. He is going to go out as a babyface. He's going to go out as a babyface. That's the nature of the beast. He's going to go out as a babyface. He is. Could this be the night where he either retains or loses the title? Could this be the night where Randy Orton costs Cody Rhodes the WWE Championship? Maybe. We haven't gotten a full-fledged... We've gotten matches between the two, but we haven't gotten a full-fledged feud between Cody and Randy. That's money to be made. Could he cost Cody the title? We're going to have to wait and see. For God's sakes, this match is a street fight. So the possibilities are endless. I know some people are saying that The Rock could show up. I don't think that's going to happen at all. Because I say that because The Rock tends to show up at the worst possible time. Whenever WWE is doing something great, The Rock has to come in and he has to ruin everything. That's The Rock. That's the definition of The Rock for you. But there's so many different scenarios when it comes to John Cena and Cody Rhodes. I'm actually excited. I'm being serious. John Cena and Cody Rhodes arguably had a not so good match at WrestleMania. I've praised the match because it was not that bad in terms of like what you were going to get. But the way that Cody lost, that was the problem for me. Cody looked like a chump when he lost. He looked horrible. How do you have the opportunity to get revenge on the guy that turned his back on you? You have the opportunity to hit him with the belt, but your emotions take over. You're like, no, I can't do it. And you drop the belt only for John Cena to gain the advantage. You looked stupid in the process. You did. Cody looked dumb in the process. You know, there's this saying when it comes to baby faces in pro wrestling, not just in WWE, but in AEW and in TNA, all major promotions. Baby faces have dumb baby face syndrome. They do. They have dumb baby face syndrome because they're just dumb. How come the heels are way smarter than the baby faces? It's crazy to think that way, but it's true. The heels are always smarter than the baby faces. It should be the other way around. But for some reason, the heels are smarter than the baby faces. That's insane. But that's SummerSlam. I'm excited. I'm going to be attending SummerSlam. It's going to be I've attended wrestling shows before, but this is going to be my first WWE event in 4 years. The last WWE event that I went to was WrestleMania 37, night 1. I didn't go to night 2. That was with the triple threat between Roman, Edge, and Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan, whatever the hell you want to call him. I didn't get to watch night 2 live, unfortunately. But I got a chance to watch night 1, and night 1 was fun. But that was my last WWE show. Since then, I would go to AEW shows and indie shows, but I haven't gone to a WWE show since 2021. And a large portion of that is because of the fact that WWE hasn't had a major televised show in the East Coast, primarily in New Jersey. In New Jersey. They're going to be at the Prudential Center this Friday. They're going to be in MetLife Stadium. I'm probably going to go to the Raw in Brooklyn. I'm excited. But it's going to be a blast. I'm excited for this weekend. It's going to be insane. But yeah, that was the WrestleHavoc podcast from July 27th. I was about to say June. Sunday, July 27th, 2025. Please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications, and be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc channel, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the friggin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is yours truly, Flamin' Ricky DeRays, signing out. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace.